Elena had always wanted to visit London. It was her dream city. She loved the history, the beautiful buildings, and the sound of British English. But this trip was more than just sightseeing. Elena came to London to practice her English. She had studied hard at home. She listened to English videos, repeated words, and wrote new sentences in her notebook. But she knew something important. To really speak English, you have to use it in real life. When her plane landed in London, Elena felt nervous and excited at the same time. Everything around her looked new. The signs, the announcements, the people, all in English. Some people spoke fast. Some had strong British accents. It was hard to understand everything, but she didn't give up. She took a small notebook from her bag and opened it. On the first page, she had written, "New words I learn in London." As she walked through the airport, she heard a voice say, "Mind the gap." She had heard this phrase in a video once, but now it felt real. She smiled and wrote it down. She whispered the words softly to herself, practicing the sound. Elena was doing something called shadowing. It means listening to a native speaker and repeating what they say. She loved this method. It helped her speak more naturally. Elena got on the underground train and looked out the window. She saw names she remembered from her English class: Piccadilly, Oxford Circus, Westminster. She felt proud. She understood something. When the train stopped, she followed the signs and walked into the city. The air was cool. The sky was cloudy. She looked up and saw Big Ben. It was even more beautiful than in pictures. Nearby, the London Eye turned slowly. She took out her phone and took pictures. But more than that, she listened carefully. A tour guide was speaking to a group of people. Elena didn't catch every word, but she tried. The guide said, "This is one of the most iconic views in London." Elena repeated it in her mind. Then she whispered it out loud. She liked the rhythm of the sentence. She wrote it in her notebook. Every small moment was a chance to learn. Elena walked around the city for hours. She visited parks, took photos of red buses, and looked inside old shops. She felt happy, but also tired. Learning a language outside the classroom was not easy. She had to think all the time, but she felt alive. She was proud of herself. Later in the day, she felt hungry. She walked past many restaurants but didn't go in. She was afraid she might not understand the menu. She worried she might say something wrong. But then she saw a small restaurant. It looked warm and quiet. The lights were soft. People inside were smiling. It felt like a safe place. Elena stood in front of the door and took a deep breath. She thought to herself, "I came here to practice. I have to try." She pushed the door open and stepped inside. A friendly waiter greeted her with a smile. "Good evening." "Table for one?" he asked. Elena's heart beat faster. She smiled back and said, "Yes, please." The waiter led her to a small table by the window. Elena looked around. The place was cozy. People were laughing and talking. She felt a little nervous, but also excited. She opened the menu. Some words were hard, but then she saw one that made her feel better. Steak. She loved steak, and she knew that word. She smiled again. "I can do this," she whispered. She had made it through her first day in London. She had used English. She had learned new words. And now she was ready to speak again. This was only the beginning of her adventure. But already, Elena felt stronger. Her English was not perfect, but she was brave. She was furious, and she was ready for more. Elena sat at her table by the window. The restaurant was quiet and warm. The lights were soft, and music played gently in the background. She looked at the menu. Some dishes had names she didn't know, but then she saw a word she recognized right away: steak. Elena smiled. She loved steak, and she felt happy to see a word she understood. It gave her a little confidence. When the waiter came back, he smiled and asked, "Are you ready to order?" Elena nodded and said, "I want the steak, please." Her voice was clear and she felt proud. She had just made a full sentence in English. The waiter wrote it down in his notebook, then asked another question. "How do you want it cooked?" Elena looked at him and froze. Her mind stopped. She understood the word cook, but she didn't know why he was asking. Was he asking who will cook it? Was he asking how much food she wanted? She wasn't sure. She tried to guess. The word how was in the question, so maybe he was asking how big the steak should be. That sounded possible. So she smiled and said, "A big one, please." The waiter blinked and looked confused. "Excuse me?" he asked. Elena repeated her answer. "A big one. Very big." She even used her hands to show the size of the steak. The waiter looked even more confused. He hesitated, then tried again. "I mean, do you want it rare, medium, or well done?" Now Elena felt nervous. She didn't understand these words. Rare, medium, well done. They were not in her textbook. She wanted to ask, "What do those mean?" But she was too embarrassed. She didn't want to look silly. She didn't want to show that she didn't understand. So she thought quickly. Well means good. Done means finished. Maybe well done means the best choice. That made sense. But she wanted to be sure. So instead of saying well done, she smiled and said, "Very, very cooked." The waiter paused for a moment. Then he nodded and said, "All right, one steak, very, very cooked." He wrote in his notebook and walked away. Elena sat back in her chair and took a deep breath. She felt a little nervous, but also proud. She spoke in English. Maybe she didn't say everything perfectly, but the waiter understood. That was enough. A few minutes later, the food arrived. The waiter placed a hot plate in front of her and said, "Enjoy your meal." Elena looked down at her steak. Something didn't look right. The steak was very dark. The edges were black. It didn't smell delicious. It smelled burned. She picked up her fork and knife and tried to cut it. It was hard. Very hard. She took a small bite. It tasted like smoke, like fire. At that moment, she understood. The waiter had taken her words seriously. Very, very cooked had turned into completely burned. The kitchen had cooked the steak too much, just like she asked. Elena felt her face turn red. She looked around. The waiter was standing near the counter. He was looking at her. He looked like he was trying not to laugh. She didn't know what to do. Should she say something? Should she complain? No, she thought. This was her mistake. She didn't want to make a scene. She didn't want to send the food back. So she took another bite and smiled, even though it tasted bad. After dinner, she paid the bill and left the restaurant quickly. Her face still felt hot. She was embarrassed. But as she walked back to her hotel, something strange happened. She started to laugh. The situation was funny. It was a big mistake, but also a good story. She had learned something important. She would never forget the words rare, medium, or well done again. Sometimes the best lessons come from real experiences. Elena had made a mistake, but she had also spoken English. She had tried, and that was something to be proud of. The next morning, Elena woke up early. The sky outside was gray, and the air was cool. London felt quiet and peaceful. She opened her notebook and looked at what she had written the day before. There were new words, short phrases, and a sentence that made her smile. Very, very cooked. She got dressed and walked down the street. A small coffee shop caught her eye. It looked warm and quiet inside. The windows were foggy from the heat of the coffee machines. She stepped in and ordered a cup of tea. The smell of fresh bread and warm drinks made her feel comfortable. She found a seat near the window and sat down. As she sipped her tea, she thought about the night before. The mistake at the restaurant had been embarrassing, but it was also funny. At first, she had felt bad, but now, with time and a little distance, it felt like a lesson. Not just a lesson about steak, but a lesson about learning itself. Suddenly, she heard a voice behind her, a voice she recognized. Very, very hooked. Elena froze for a second. Then she turned her head slowly. It was the same waiter from the restaurant. He was standing at the counter, holding a cup of coffee, smiling at her. Their eyes met, and they both started to laugh. "Oh no, you remember me," she said, covering her face with her hands. "Of course," he said. "That was the most cooked steak I have ever seen." They both laughed again, and this time, Elena didn't feel embarrassed. She felt happy. She had made a mistake, yes, but she had also made a connection. The waiter wasn't laughing to be mean. He was sharing a moment with her, a funny moment between two people from different countries speaking the same language. "Next time," he said gently, "just say, 'Well done.'" "I will," Elena promised. After he left, she opened her notebook again and wrote down a new title, The Steak Story. Under it, she wrote, "Next time, just say, 'Well done.'" She smiled as she wrote. She would never forget that phrase again, not because she memorized it in class, but because she had lived it. Elena finished her tea and looked around the coffee shop. She saw a young woman standing at the counter looking confused. The woman was holding a small travel dictionary and seemed unsure of what to say. Elena stood up and walked over. "They're asking if you want your coffee with milk or black," she said softly. The woman looked relieved and smiled. "Thank you." "You're welcome," Elena replied. As she returned to her seat, she realized something special. She had just helped someone else, just like she had wanted help the night before. That small act made her feel confident. She was not just learning English anymore. She was using it. She was growing. Language is not only about grammar and vocabulary. It is also about connection. When you speak another language, you open a door. You show that you care. You show that you are trying. And sometimes that effort is enough to make someone smile. Elena knew her English was not perfect, but she had learned something more important than rules. She had learned that making mistakes is part of the journey, that laughing at yourself is okay, that even a burned steak can turn into a good memory. Before leaving the cafe, she decided to practice one more thing. She whispered some of the phrases from the day before. "I want the steak, please." "How do you want it cooked?" "Very, very cooked." "Next time, just say, 'Well done.'" I take a sip of my tea and smile. She repeated them slowly, with feeling, just like in her shadowing practice. She listened to her voice. It sounded more confident now. Elena stepped out into the cool London air. She looked up at the sky and smiled. She still had many things to learn, but now she understood something big. Language learning is not about being perfect. It's about being brave, being kind, and moving forward. She walked down the street, her notebook in her hand, her heart a little lighter, and her English a little stronger. Elena's story is simple, but powerful. She came to London with a goal to practice her English. She was excited, curious, and a little afraid. At first, she only said a few small phrases. She listened carefully, wrote new words in her notebook, and repeated what she heard. She used every small moment to learn, and that made a big difference. But the most important part of her story happened at a restaurant. Elena made a mistake. She didn't understand a simple question. She felt nervous, embarrassed, and unsure. But instead of giving up, she smiled, stayed polite, and tried her best to respond. Her answer, very, very cooked, was wrong, but it created a funny memory she would never forget. Later, that same mistake helped her make a new connection. The waiter remembered her. They laughed together, and Elena felt something change. She stopped feeling shy. She started feeling proud. She learned a new phrase. She even helped another tourist the next day. Her confidence grew because she didn't let one mistake stop her. This story teaches us something very important. Making mistakes is part of learning. When you speak a new language, it's okay to get it wrong. What matters is that you try, you learn, and you keep going. Real learning doesn't always happen in a classroom. It happens in coffee shops, on busy streets, and in little everyday moments, just like Elena's. If you are learning English, don't be afraid. Speak, make mistakes. Laugh when things go wrong. Write down new words. Listen closely. And most of all, believe in yourself. Just like Elena, your story will grow with every step you take. Congratulations! If you are reading or listening to this now, it means you've just completed a full English story. That means you've improved your listening, your understanding, and maybe even your confidence. Well done! Now, here's a small quiz for you. What did Elena say when the waiter asked how she wanted her steak cooked? A. Medium. B. Very, very cooked. Comment your answer below. A or B. Let us know what you think. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel to support us. Your support helps us stay motivated to create more fun and helpful English content just for you. We also welcome donations, big or small. In the beginning, it's not easy to create high-quality lessons. We do this for free to help English learners like you, and your donation helps us continue. Thank you so much, and see you in the next story.